All right, once you have your shape sawed out with the jeweler's saw, the last thing you need to do is kind of finish and refine it with some file work. So you can kind of see around this edge that I could file it a little bit more, kind of clean that up and make it a little smoother. I might file around his face a tiny bit. Essentially, if you don't get the shape exactly how you want it with the jeweler's saw, that's okay, because you can file it and slowly change it into a really precise shape and smooth things out. I like to file on my bench pin again, just because it kind of lets me hold it secure. I like to hang it off the edge a little bit. If you are holding it and filing it, you're gonna have a hard time keeping this in place, and it's kind of like a moving target, so you're gonna really struggle to get precise file work done if you are kind of wiggling around and not holding it secure, right? So I'm gonna work with this tiny file just because the size of my project. Some of your toolboxes have a large file. This one's good for larger scale and also for filing something really straight, right? So this is a student example that could use a lot more filing work, but I could have used the large file on this edge to really straighten that line out, right? So that's what you'd use this larger one for, and you can tell that filing really can improve a project. You can see this one, if it's a geometric shape especially, it should be pretty precise. Your brain has a way of picking out any inconsistencies, so really spend your time making it look perfect with the file, right? So I'm just gonna go through, file this down so that it's the right shape. Like I said, I like to hold it off the edge. And filing can take a little bit of time. It's not as quick as sawing something out, so you might have to spend time really going around the shape that you want to be smooth. All right, something else that really refines your piece is to file on a bevel. And what a bevel means is that you're filing on an angle, right? So when you cut metal, and you can kind of see it in here, it leaves some really sharp, or it can leave really sharp edges. Filing on an angle kind of softens that. And it's a little bit tricky sometimes with internal spaces, but I'm just filing these edges down just on a slight angle to soften them out a little bit. So I usually try to aim for a 45 degree. You can see right here, that's gonna be challenging. So just try your best. You just kind of wanna hit the edge so that nothing snags, so that it's not sharp, and that it just looks a little bit more complete. So I would do that on both sides. So file this side on a bevel as well. It's a little bit easier to demonstrate with a scratched piece of copper. So you can see this one has not been filed at all, and especially when we start to work with raw materials, this stuff can be pretty sharp. So when you are filing out an angle, again, I'm holding it secure, and I usually go down, but I'm gonna kind of just drag it down. And when you're working with copper, you can actually start to see that it's removing quite a bit of material. So you can kind of tell that it's started to being filed on an angle, right? So it points down like this. When you have finished filing it on a bevel, you're gonna use this tool called a burnisher. And what that does is it smooths your metal out. So when you use a file, it essentially leaves a bunch of tiny little lines. And you usually can't notice it, but this burnisher really smooths that out and gives it a nice shine. And all I'm doing is using kind of the crook of my thumb on this piece right here and pushing it down. Sometimes I'll scrape it like this. And I'm just going back and forth until that metal is nice and smooth. So you can kind of see it starting to shine up compared to this side that hasn't been filed, right? So you can try to do that on your quarter two. Again, it's gonna be really challenging just because it's a really tight space. But even if you just kind of go in and scrape it a tiny bit, It's gonna remove any tiny pieces of metal that are kind of hanging out in there and shine it up a tiny bit. So I'm gonna go through, burnish it a tiny bit. Again, it's kind of challenging to get really in there, but you'll still be able to do a little bit of burnishing.